Wednesday, October 3rd, Downtown Development Authority meeting. Susan, you want to take vote?
Absolutely. Bob Gunzel.
Here.
Tyler Kinley.
Here.
Rick Klopp.
Here.
Howard Lazarus.
Here.
Jessica Letow. Here. Joe Lowenstein. Here. Molly McFarland. Here. Darren McKinnon.
Present.
Sean Moat.
Here.
Risha Narayan.
Also present.
Keith Orr.
Here.
Bill Weiss.
Present and accounted for.
Do we have a quorum?
I'd like to start by welcoming the newest member to the meeting, Tyler McKinley. Thanks so much for being here. And for everyone to know, in case you don't know, he is we have a world famous athlete sitting at the table now. He's an all-star.
Oh, thank you.
He's an all-star ultimate Frisbee player, so welcome to the DDA.
Thank you.
I would like to take this moment to open a public hearing to talk about the new parking rate increases that are going into effect January 1st, which is an increase of 10 cents an hour. Anybody? Discussion?
No, anyone who'd like to add?
Anyone who'd like to?
Jim Mogensen. So one thing, as people talk about how we determine where people park, one thing I think is important for the DDA to focus on is that people will complain about the 10-cent increase, but it won't modify their parking behavior. I mean, that's the reality of it. I mean, I park in a parking structure. I don't have a smartphone, so I can't add to my parking meter, right? I know where it is. I have a disability placard. I know where my spot is over on the library lot. Right? That's how people do that. People will try to hunt. I don't want to hunt. I don't want to spend an extra 5 minutes because I haven't given that much time to when I have to be downtown. So I think it's important to remember that. It's the same kind of thing with the credit cards. Now everybody is using their credit cards. And people use credit cards for astonishingly small purchases now. Right? And there are costs associated with that. Right? You can go down and I once saw someone at the New York Pizza Depot. They had a special. It was their anniversary. And the person actually paid more in a fee on the credit card than it cost them to buy the pizza. It's astonishing, right? We all understand how this works. If people, when you think about parking at Trader Joe's, right, in Ann Arbor, we're all enlightened. So everybody is taking the bus there, or they're riding their bike, or they're walking, right? Nobody does that, right? I can say parking is never a problem at Trader Joe's, right? Theoretically, right, there are a few people, and I know most of those folks who are really intense folks who do all that kind of stuff. But the reality is that as a general principle, so just keep that in mind, that it probably won't drive too many people from their on-street parking behavior to the parking structure, but it does make sense to normalize it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak? Seeing no more, the public hearing is closed. Next on the agenda is approval of the board meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
Motion the agenda.
The agenda.
So moved.
Agenda.
Second.
Second. Do we have a second?
Great.
I see. Next up is audience participation. We have one person signed up, Peter, and you have 4 minutes. When you have one left.
Wait, we need to vote.
Oh, sorry.
All in favor?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The agenda passes. Now, audience participation. These are 4 minutes, and I'll hold my finger up when you have one left.
Don't start yet, okay? Thank you very much. I appreciate an opportunity to speak to you all. I am not going to go through this report. You have a copy in front of you. I would love to meet with the appropriate people at the DDA in the future. This started because of President Schlichel and the dean, my dean at School of Architecture and Planning, Jonathan Massey, and my dean at the School of Business, who a year ago said, you've got to make your classrooms come alive. You've got to make them real case studies. You've got to work with local clients. And so our client was the city of Ann Arbor last semester, and we worked on city-owned properties, and we really dug down into very difficult, complex issues that we thought the city could use a little more background briefing on, with vision, with economics, and we ended up hiring some of those over the summer to take an even deeper dive after the class, and we focused on 3 big problems. Those 3 big problems are on the title, and we're going to dive even deeper this fall. We've met with a lot of the key stakeholders in town, including some members of the school board, members of the library board, some of the city staff people. I even had Tyler involved. Tyler's a former student, so was Darren, a couple of A+ students from years ago.
Yeah, right.
I changed your grade. You really, to do real estate well, you need to understand all the stakeholders and all their economics and all the possibilities. So the first place that we really got into was workforce affordable housing, people making $30,000 to $60,000 per year. We said if you look at the capital stack at 100% of debt and equity, about 25% is equity, 75% is debt, and the biggest part of the equity part is buying the land. The only way you're going to really make a dent into affordable housing is to find land that is publicly owned, whether it's city-owned land like 721 North Main or the former library site, former Y site, or to find land that's owned by the university or the public schools, around the schools that's not being used, maybe air rights over parking lots. This idea, the Huron, was to take the land on the west side of Huron High School and put a couple of hundred units of affordable housing. And there's an adjacent site that's owned by the university that could make that even larger. So getting affordable housing with publicly owned land is a way to drop the rents 25%. The next area we got into, and these are all fleshed out in a number of pages in your report, so listen to me, don't look through the report right now, is what do we do with master planning the downtown? We all know about all the stakeholders and all the issues about the core spaces and their site. One issue that has not been part of the public dialogue is if we rip up that sales agreement, they're going to sue us for lost profits. The lost profits on that core spaces building is at least $20 million. So as you think about what you want to see on that site, don't just think about we give up the $10 million sales price, add to a $20 million of lost profit we're going to lose in a lawsuit, according to a very competent local real estate attorney that you all know. But this is, I'm going to go to this is the library site, this is core spaces, this is the former Y, this is South 5th.
Peter, who's the attorney?
Can't tell you.
Well, you're
You
making
know.
statements in a public meeting with very large numbers.
I'm pledged to confidentiality, but he's somebody local that you'll know and very competent. Yes, 1 minute to go. So what to do with the Y, what to do with the library. We went to the library board and showed them 5 places to possibly move a new library if and when that happens. One of the most interesting ideas was to move it on a First Martin-owned site and to incorporate the Liberty Plaza Park into that new development. To do a mixture of market rate and affordable housing on the library site makes sense. My last 30 seconds, flip over here. This is the yellow is the 2.5-mile tree line trail. When I touch it, it's active, huh? And we recommended that it be extended down Stadium Boulevard, down Washtenaw to Huron Parkway, back to Huron Parkway to Plymouth Road, and it's a 14-mile circle all the way around downtown that connects the neighborhoods. I look forward to meeting you with to talk more of the details. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Seeing none, we'll move to the next agenda item, which is reports from city boards and commissions. Ray Vetter. You have 4 minutes.
Good morning. 16 downtown and near downtown neighbors gathered at the Citizens Advisory Council meeting last night to pull together and discuss some of the currently proposed changes being considered in the downtown area. Items related to DTE, lower town sites, Main Street, the tree line, the work of the DDA on Ashley, First, Huron, William Street, and related areas. These are all related, and those relationships have to be considered every step of the way. And of course, we are very much grateful to Peter with regard to pulling this together in terms of the first document that he produced, which everyone in the Citizens Advisory Council got and read. But in addition to that, the second one, which is dealing more specifically with certain issues within that. And we welcome that as well and tend to familiarize ourselves with stuff with it. Those of us who attended last night's meeting have a sense of urgency. We need to strive to know what's going on every day. Conditions and possibilities are changing rapidly. On Wednesday, October the 10th, 2018 at 11 o'clock a.m. at the corner of Broadway and Maiden Lane, a groundbreaking ceremony, celebration of the largest private development in Ann Arbor since Briarwood Mall will take place. That's the largest development since Briarwood Mall. And that we're celebrating at this particular point in terms of moving ahead on the construction. That's $140 million development, including apartments, condominiums, and retail space. And that's coming next week, and you're welcome to come to that particular event. It should be very useful. There'll be a number of speakers from the state and all that sort of thing as well. But a short walk away will be a University of Michigan 1,000-unit parking structure. You don't hear much about it, but nonetheless, it's in process in terms of that particular location. Some negotiations with regard to possibilities of perhaps letting others use that space as well. And nearby, the DTE site with plans for a hotel, 3 condo buildings, and a public park. Just to the south, the work on Carytown is being completed. In the last 4 days, changes are being proposed for East Summit. This is just in the last few days. For East Summit, for North Division, and a major change in the bank block and Courthouse Square buildings on Main, East Huron, and South 4th, which fit very beautifully into what it is that the DDA has done in terms of preparing Huron Street and Main Street with regard to changes that we all knew needed to come. And that's already now in process, and a meeting just took place yesterday with regard to that. Also, permission has now been given to tear down the old factory buildings at 415 West Washington. And of course, there are lots of people concerned about the birds. But what I'm concerned about are the land. Because for a long period of time, that's been a prime piece of land with regard to possible development in the downtown relating to the Old West Side. And now we can move ahead with that and perhaps take care of the birds as well. Also, the DDA and City Council have scheduled a joint work session, you're probably already aware of that, for next Monday, October the 8th, 7 o'clock p.m. at CTM on Industrial Highway. What about plans to tear down all the old houses east of South Main? South Main to Keach, that whole row of houses are going to be torn down. And it's probably going to be approved and moved ahead on in terms of 4-story building and all in that distance. What about the library block? Of course, Peter is giving us a new document with regard to the library block. The library, the YMCA site, South Ashley, and also South First. All of those things that the DDA has been working on in terms of getting recent approval are now things that have to be related to the nature of possibilities and locations in the area of the downtown. And that's what we're striving the Citizens Advisory Council to create in terms of our own knowledge, is to be aware of what it is that's going on. And I'll tell you, because somebody, people at this particular point says there are secret meetings going on. Anybody talks to anybody apparently is having a secret meeting. But the meetings are not secret. It's just a lot of people at this particular point are excited about the fact that we can do an awful lot in downtown Ann Arbor. We can help the whole community and perhaps do something about the housing shortage that we have within that community. Last night's message to the CAC is a message to all of us. Let's support actions that fit hopes for integrated planning. Let's be fully aware of what's possible and support only the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Next up, let's see, DDA members communication. I welcomed Tyler too soon. I can do it again. Second, I'd like to just give you a reminder, and Ray did as well, that we have a City Council DDA annual work session, October 8th, 7 p.m. CTN. Are there any other comments from any other board members? Jessica?
So monthly, as many of you know, I hold two downtown hall coffee hours to talk about issues related to the DDA and the downtown. This month, the hours are at Argus Farm Stop this coming Wednesday, October 10th, 5:30 to 7 p.m., and that's Argus on Liberty. And the next one is a walk and talk of the downtown, specifically of the People Friendly Streets project. So if you'd like to learn more, or what you already know but see it on the streets, that starts at 10 a.m. next Saturday, October 13th, and will conclude well in, I forget if that's a football Saturday, but if it is, it concludes well in advance of game time. So you'll be off the streets and out of the way, or at the big house, as the case may be.
That's a night game, actually.
7:30.
7:30.
Well clear of the game, as I understand. Thanks, Mary.
Any other member communications?
I do. So to follow up on what Mr. Detter and Mr. Allen presented, there's a communication to council at the last meeting about options for redevelopment of the Y lot that included a multi-site option that's consistent with what Mr. Allen talked about. Also at the last meeting, council approved changes to the connection costs for ADUs, which would help make them a little bit more economically feasible. The coming meeting, there is another agreement for the library lot development council will consider, as well as the financial instruments to implement the people-friendly streets. Last week, the council also approved, as Mr. Detter said, the ability to, or the Historic District Commission approved, removing the buildings from the Historic District so that they can be demolished. There are concerns about the chimney swifts and the chimney that we'll look at as part of any development. So all those things tend to push forward those things that both of our guest speakers talked about, and it does underscore the fact that there is action being taken. So the meetings are not held in secret, as Mr. Davis said, but you do need to pay attention to what's going on. The agenda for next week is primarily about the status of parking. It's a required annual meeting under the parking agreement, and Susan has been working with our new Assistant City Administrator, who is a wealth of information on parking, to provide some options. So it'll be an interesting discussion.
Thank you, Howard. Anyone else? Seeing none. Executive Director Communications, Susan?
Yeah, thank you. One last thing to talk about on that work session. I would urge everybody here, if you can, to make time to attend. My hope is, in addition to parking, we get into some of the bigger, meatier topics. I think spent a lot of time on parking in the past, but where I think we could spend some time with council and maybe move things forward are on the big issues. So an example is mobility. You know, scooters are just one of the many, but I think we should be talking about where is mobility going downtown. Affordability. I think we're all wrestling with that question. Sustainability. You know, how do we actually pursue city goals? I think there are a lot of big topics that we don't have a chance as policymakers to sit down and talk about very often. So it's my hope that next week you and council will use that chance to really get into the bigger topics. That said, two other things to bring to your attention. On Friday, you will be receiving a full copy. Where's Zhuwei Chen, our incredible intern, has assembled this year's State of the Downtown Report. This is my favorite project that our staff does this year, every year. And what Zhuwei has been doing is building on the success of earlier State of the Downtown reports and adding to it new content, revising how information is shared. And we welcome everybody to give us feedback on it. It should be out the door by about Friday. But just to give you a sense of some of the things that she's been able to find, working with the Visitors Bureau, for instance, that we have a new stat in here about the visitors downtown, 40% of whom come from within the state, 60% of whom come from out of state. We capture things like the employers. We capture the housing that's going on, but also what's still out there as far as more demand and where the prices are going as far as condos and apartments. So when we talk about affordability, we have the data in front of us to point to how unaffordable things are going. An example is downtown rents for an apartment jumped in the last 4 years from $1,500 a month to $1,900 a month. Our wages in our community aren't growing as fast. As I said, it's a wealth of data. The goal of this every year is to put it up on our site, distribute it widely, and then as people need it, you can tap into it. So I'm going to pass it around, not to distract from the rest of the meeting, but again, it's a showcase, I think, of what DDA can do to assemble information that is useful to everybody, pointing out what's remarkable about downtown, what some of our opportunities are downtown, and frankly, what some of our challenges are downtown. The other thing to bring to your attention is at the last council meeting, or maybe it was the meeting of the October 1st, there was an announcement about the National Citizens Survey that was commissioned by the city. It's an update to a previous survey in which a professional pollster got a hold of citizens and asked their thoughts about city services. And it's everything from police and fire and solid waste. And a couple of the key points that I just wanted to bring to our attention because it relates to what DDA does. One, a question was asked about people's feelings of positivity, and one question was parking. Last year, or the last time the survey was done, it was 36%. We have inched our way up to 42% of the people that responded thought we did an excellent or good job. And what's interesting about the ease of parking being so low, Some of you may remember we met with university researcher Robert Hampshire earlier this year. And he pointed out that actually it takes somewhere close to 3 to 4 minutes, or excuse me, 3 to 4% of the traffic on street are people looking for parking. Almost everybody finds a parking space immediately. And yet the survey responses don't reflect it. So somehow or another we have a job ahead of us to communicate parking availability. Another stat that I thought was very interesting was a tremendous number of people called out the success of downtown. I think we are like among the highest in the United States of people calling out the success of downtown being an asset. But perhaps the most valuable to me was comments from our community. They were asked to give their response about mobility. And the question specifically was asked, would you be willing to drive a little slower if it meant that things would be a little safer? Would you be willing, for instance, a ride that might take 10 minutes, for it to take 13 minutes? Would you be willing? And the great number of people in our community said yes, they would. So it's reflective of what we saw with people-friendly streets. It's reflective of the conversations we've had with people on street as we looked at Huron and First and Ashley and William, that so many of our community members said yes, in fact, they would be willing to concede a little bit of time to make things safer. For those that are interested, I'll send a link to the site just so you can take a look. I think it's actually very interesting to see what our citizens say about city services, which includes some of the things DDA does. So thank you. Oh, yeah, Howard.
Some of the surveys, for the first time, we've broken them down by demographics as well as location. So you can see which wards are happier than others. And you can see by gender, by income, home ownership status, and racial background, how people feel about life in Ann Arbor. To your point, 91% of our residents said they'd live with they would accept at least a slight delay in travel time if it meant having safer streets. And almost 3/4 said they'd be willing to live with a moderate or significant increase in drive time as well. So it does underscore that we are headed in the right direction on things like the people-friendly streets projects. But there are some challenges in there. It does show that there are parts of our community that don't feel as engaged and welcome as others. And there are some challenges that we need to address, even with the understanding that 97% of people think this is a great place to raise your kids. So.
Yeah, Rishi.
Will you email this PDF out when it's
Absolutely.
PDFable?
We will. I'm looking at UA. I think it should be by the end of the week. And it'll be up on our website. This is for the benchmark, the City of the Downtown report. And I'll also send a link to the city survey. I'll send around a hard copy just so you can see what's available.
I also want to say that I appreciate the newsletter that comes out. I find it very interesting, and I do read it. And I think you're doing a great job with that.
Thank you.
Okay, now it's time to do the approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion? Second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. All right, the agenda passes. So first up today, the subcommittee reports, the operations committee. Keith or Phil?
I'm going to start,
Okay.
do the parking part of it, and then Keith will do the transportation part. Parking updates, starting on page 19 in your packet, which is the parking and transportation report. Some highlights from that report. Installation of new e-park machines and space markers is expected to continue through the end of October. Everything seems to be going well there. We have new metered spaces installed on Mosley, which is the new 615 South Main building, apartment building. The Destination Ann Arbor, formerly the CBB, had purchased a mural on the Liberty Street garage, but the other condo owner wasn't supportive of that, so that project is not moving forward. There's rooftop fencing at all the garages and on several floors in many locations. Fencing at Liberty Square will be added shortly, and an RFP sent out for more fencing at Forest and 4th and Washington garages. The Ann Ashley expansion project, the project site plan was reviewed by city staff and revised plans were resubmitted last week. It's hoped that the project can be considered by the Planning Commission in October. Construction phasing details aren't finalized yet, but during construction we anticipate moving city employee parking out of Ann Ashley to the Library Lane lot. I think there's all that information in your packet. Keith, to you.
Let's see, one of our big programs, the Go Pass, I say big because it does such great things in transportation and sustainability, is their annual renewals, and that is in process right now. Arbor Bike, which has not been around available all summer for lack of an operator. A new operator has been selected. This is a joint project between the university, the city, the DDA, and AAATA. AAATA are the ones who are the ones spearheading everything going on there, and they're the ones who selected the operator, and I believe they're going to be announcing something maybe as we speak about who the operator is and what some of the plans are. But it could start as early as this fall on campus and system-wide in the spring. Let's see. We had a request from Cahoots, which is the co-working space over here on Huron, for a car share pilot at 4th and Washington using an electric car, I believe specifically a Tesla. We supported a short-term pilot to see if it is a way of encouraging alternative transportation modes. Speaking of GoPass, that was one of the requirements of doing this, was that the people who signed up for the car share also had to be signed up for GoPass, so that it was that connection was made. We're also supporting adding EVs to the garage, which currently doesn't have any. This one, including one for this pilot. If we want any details on that, Jada can provide them. Is that detailed enough for everybody? All right. We also, of course, the big conversation of the last month here about transportation, heard a lot about scooters and specifically birds and their flocks and their nests. There are, of course, issues around it because it's the Old West all over again. They just got dropped in to the city and without any real sense of how this is going to work. And of course, there's problems with laws about where motorized scooters are allowed, where they can be parked. In fact, as a result of that, about 50 of them, I think, have been impounded. Somewhere about there because they were parked in the right-of-way. And of course, that just creates a danger for everybody. So we heard a lot about what's being talked about how to manage this, because we're certainly not anti-scooter or anti-alternative methods of getting around. Just has to be managed appropriately. And we've also heard that there are other organizations on the verge of coming in, so this has to be done not just with this one organization, but with an eye to however many people may be and organizations may be interested in doing this. And that's the transportation report.
And our next operations committee meeting is Halloween at 11 a.m.
Keith?
Yep.
So
optional.
Yeah, one quick thing. I was in Pittsburgh yesterday, and I was interested to see that what they've had dropped in is sort of the one step up from this type of scooter. They're little electric scooters that are sort of scattered all over the place. And so obviously our new assistant city administrator probably kind of has a take on that, because it occurred to me, how are they dealing with it? Because they're parked all over the place in strange places, and how do they monitor them and all that? So,
and that is a good point, is that it's not like we're the first community that had scooters dropped on them. So one of the things that is being looked at is how is it being managed other places, and let's look at the places where it's been most successfully managed.
And sort of what Susan was saying about the mobility trends moving forward, I was out east in a whole bunch of cities the last couple of weeks, and there's all kinds of stuff out there right now. There are all kinds of scooter vehicles and all kinds of stuff. So I think it's a very good time for us to be engaging with the city and how to deal with it.
There are a lot of questions that come with that. One is the use of the public right-of-way for a private for-profit, and what the licensing agreement ought to be. The other question is, where do these devices belong? does a person on a motorized conveyance going at 50 miles an hour belong on the sidewalk in a crowded downtown? It speaks towards the improvements that are included in the people-friendly streets, providing protected lanes for bikes and for other vehicles. You won't get people off the sidewalks unless they feel safe in the streets. So how we get people in around downtown will cause us to look at both the ordinances but also the facilities that are there. It may require us at some point to relook at how much on-street parking we need to provide ways for people to get around. So it's a great opportunity to be leaning forward on the balls of our feet instead of back on our heels and trying to anticipate and partner with these firms rather than have them just show up in the wee hours of the morning, the dark of night, and have a plague descend upon us. So it'll continue to be a challenge, but I am comfortable that with the projects we have planned, we are going along the right path, provide protected ways for people to feel safe by whatever means of travel they choose.
And I believe actually Hitchcock addressed birds being dropped in evil ways.
One of them showed up in City Hall a couple of days after they were introduced, and there were a lot of Alfred Hitchcock references.
Agreed score.
Build a chimney to keep them in.
And on that note, we'll move right on to the Finance Committee. Bob?
Thank you. We have a resolution to present. I move a resolution to approve the contract for the city for the first Ashley, William, and Huron bond. And request the second.
Second.
So this is pretty straightforward. It codifies our relationship with the city in terms of issuing a bond for this project and us being required to pay them back for it. It covers Huron, First, Ashley, and William Street improvements. The total price is $17 million. DDA will pay 15% in cash, basically our design costs, and we'll be bonding the remainder of 85%. I think it's been a while since we've done a bond issue on a streetscape project, and maybe the first time we've done a written agreement with the city, but I think it's in both parties' best interest. And it's straightforward. Joe's reviewed it, of course, and our attorney. Questions, comments?
Any discussion? Anything to vote?
Yes.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
Okay. Passes. At the meeting, the August expenses were reviewed. We had discussion about the audit. The auditors are done and have provided a draft copy to Joe, and it'll be the subject of a meeting with the auditors at our next Finance Committee meeting, which is Thursday, November 1st, 2018. Any questions or comments about the report?
You said the next committee?
Yes.
All right. Next up is capital improvements. John?
Thanks, Marie. Streetscape projects, an update. Fifth and Detroit is moving along nicely now. I think a substantial threshold is getting up out of the ground once the underground work is completed now, and that's usually where sort of the surprises come in. So at this point, the work is focusing on the east side of Fifth Avenue, surface work. So I think, as far as I know, and if anyone has any questions, Liz is here for specific questions. As far as I know, we're on schedule.
Just wanted to comment that it plays into what we were talking about earlier in terms of slowing traffic down for safety. If anyone has been by it, it's A, looking very beautiful, but two, as much as you could see in the plans, it's even more apparent as you see it coming together that the narrowing of the street and the dividing of putting the island in the middle is really going to have a traffic calming effect, and it's so much clearer where pedestrians cross. I think it's going to really help make it a safer street.
Well, thanks for those comments. I think kudos to Amber and the design team on looking at a lot of options, and we challenged them about it, and especially the pedestrian safety issues and so forth, and community high, and a lot of complicated issues. So I think the design was excellent, and the execution has been very good. So far, so good. The next project, Huron Street, challenges as always. MDOT has requested more information, so our staff is working with city staff to try to give them more information, and we will hope that will move forward, and we'll see what happens. First, Ashley and William. We had a very good meeting with the design team and Amber's able guidance. We talked through a lot of the priorities of various blocks, started sort of getting into a bit of a deep dive about what's trying to be accomplished in different stretches of those streets and so forth, and gave some input and reaction. And I think that the good news is that I think it all sort of, looking at it from a budget point of view, it all evened out. I think there's some things we maybe simplified, some things we looked to add, and so forth. So I think that was an excellent meeting, and I appreciate those who were there to give input. By the way, yeah.
I was going to say, I have to say that being on that west side of town, there are a group of building owners, business owners, and people who live in that area that are really excited about this project. We're going to gather and talk about what it might look like to create an identity on that side of town as part of this construction project. So more soon on that, maybe an arts district, something in that neighborhood. So people are really excited about that construction that's going to be happening. So
well, that's tremendous, because I think again that advantage of the work that was put in up front to engage with folks, helps them all meet each other, and sort of get on the same page and hash things out and create that energy moving forward. So I think that's great to hear. Other aspects of it is just sort of working on the technical issues about what overlaps with the city's CIC and water main projects and all those things. So that's the other sort of more on the technical side work that the design team is currently working on. The next thing at that last meeting we talked about, the executive director of the State Street District came to the meeting to give us some feedback from business owners. You may remember that the project as envisioned originally and budgeted originally was focused on the concept of widening sidewalks and obviously therefore eliminating parking, and for just the one stretch of one block between Liberty and William. So it was very helpful for her to have done what I guess I'd describe as an informal survey of folks, just to try to get some feedback of what the state of play is now, and there's serious question of whether that really is the right way to move forward. So I think the end result was that staff guidance and the committee's support, the notion of using a similar process that we used for this last project for First Ashley and William, where we really try to kind of meet with stakeholders, try to start getting input early on, all those things. It's another good example. I think it'll be an interesting thing to look at a very fairly focused area in one street. It's a little different animal than the last time, but I think that basic process might work very well in that case. And obviously it also, one thing to keep in mind for everyone moving forward is that connection with the William Street project. As William comes up at that end with a bikeway, how that connects to State Street, the university, and so forth. We're starting to sort of connect, some of these things are all starting to connect together now.
Union is under construction.
Yeah. So the last thing we talked about was CIP process moving forward and what projects we may start to look at moving forward, both sort of major projects and smaller projects, and people reacted to things that Amber put on the list. So I think that's something that we'll just continue developing and move forward as we can keep plugging things into the 10-year plan and how we're approaching these capital improvement projects. I think that's about all I got. Anyone have any questions for me or for staff?
I do have a question about the Huron project. So MDOT's reservations, were they about any one particular block or portion of the project, or was it an overall reservation?
At this point, they are not responding to our specific requests, and they haven't shared specific reservations. What they've asked for is additional process, and particularly communication from city officials that they are comfortable with what we are requesting.
Okay.
So we have strong partners in city engineering and transportation that are helping us to communicate that support to the state.
Okay, thank you.
So they asked us to confirm that we don't have any concerns about potential increases in response times at certain parts of the day for police and fire, and we've reassured them that we don't. We also have a meeting with the regional MDOT staff to talk about some other things within the next 2 weeks, and I'll make sure we add this to the agenda.
Any other questions? Our next meeting will be Wednesday, October 17th at 11 a.m.
Perfect. And next is Partnerships Economic Development Committee. Joan?
Okay, could do a little tag team with Jessica. Maybe I'll do the sign ordinance and the. We had some representatives from the city and the contractor, the consultant who's working with the city on changing the sign ordinance, which has been a multi-year prospect because there are so many things that are involved in changing the sign ordinance. There's a public open house tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. in the council chambers. And a copy of the proposed changes to the sign ordinance is on the city website and on our website as well, if anyone wants to look at that. So there's some significant changes there. And then we had our partners come to report to us. I'll let you report about that, Jessica.
Sure. So there was conversation about the birds. I think they had dropped just a few days before our meeting, so there was active conversation about how people were using them, our understanding of how they'd been received in other communities, things like that. So that was a first snapshot of that. The ride thanked all of us, thanked everyone in the community for the successful renewal of the transit millage. And we'll be considering some strategies to address congestion on some routes. I don't remember if that's in conjunction with the North Side traffic study or what that is, but they're looking at the different lines for efficiency and improvement. City Council, after reviewing the medical marijuana requirements, retained the 600 feet buffer between dispensaries and approved revisions to the fire safety inspection code. There's also a solid waste study underway that includes an examination of the downtown alley problems. That's something that comes up really in every conversation with the Partnerships Committee and in many conversations with downtown business owners. There are challenges there, so hoping to be a partner in some of the solutions. From the Planning Commission, there's a site plan on Jackson Road that's been postponed to address neighbor concerns that its construction might contribute to expanding the dioxin plume. I want to say that's in the Lakewood neighborhood, I believe. And then from the DDA, we shared our project updates and a snapshot. This just a few weeks ago. This was much earlier on in its conception, but a snapshot of the State of the Downtown report, and even the snapshot was pretty exciting. Any questions from the Partnerships Committee or the Partnerships Committee?
Question maybe for Joan. I haven't been keeping up with the sign ordinance. Do you know, or does anyone here know what impacts it may have in the downtown, and especially in the right-of-ways? Are there things that significant changes happening that
I don't think they're changing anything that about what already exists and is not enforced in this right-of-way downtown, you know, with respect to the sandwich boards and things. It's I don't think anything will change there. Some of the significant changes that they are having, for example, we all know more around the downtown rather than right in the downtown, like a lot of rental housing will have, 365 days a year, signs up saying whatever it is, realty, renting now for fall, regardless. And those signs are not going to be allowed anymore. They're, under the proposed, or they would be allowed for only short periods of time. So things like that, it's, kind of worth taking a look at. And these are all things that the consultant has proposed along with city planning staff, and whether it'll be adopted, who knows, but they are getting a lot. They've done some public surveys and online surveys, and this is another opportunity.
Is there anything about how far the signs, for instance, extend into right-of-ways that would affect how
There
we deal with
is-
trees? And,
There is
just-
something, but I can't remember what it is. There is something about that.
Okay. Is that something that we'll have to make sure we're, Amber may be all over it already. I just want to make sure that.
Yeah, I was just going to remind everyone that Kelly sent out the draft ordinance and a link to where you can provide feedback. And planning staff did say they'd be coming back to partnerships. So if you take a look at that and if you have any concerns, you can communicate it to staff and we'll.
Yeah, I've been gone for a couple of weeks, so I haven't had a chance to, but in a nutshell, is there anything that you're seeing in there, though, that could affect our streetscape projects, for instance?
No, this only legislates private signage, so not signage in the right-of-way, not banner signs, and not the sandwich board signs, so I think for the most part it seemed like a pretty thoughtful, reasonable approach.
Oh, great, thanks.
So I think that was it for partnerships.
The next meeting is Wednesday, October 10th at 9 a.m.
All right, and the executive committee, we met prior to the board meeting today, and we simply went through the agenda, and still getting me up to speed as the chair. And Susan let us know that we had a speaker for today. So that was that. Next, any new business? Seeing none. Any other audience participation?
Jim Mogensen. So since I'm here, one of the reasons I have been able to come to these meetings is because I go to the Watts Technical Committee meeting, and then this is the next meeting on my way to Marty. And so it might be worthwhile just checking in to make sure, because this always conflicts with that technical meeting, to make sure that that there's some kind of representation. Obviously, there are people from the city there, but just to make sure that information that's emerging from the DDA get to that meeting. Because all the MDOT people are there. We're working on these things. I wanted to talk about the bird scooters, since I haven't been around as much, but I all understand it's been a big topic of conversation. But one thing I think it's important to make sure it gets talked about as people think about this is that whole issue of safety. Because as a person who uses a walker, all right, I can tell you that even with the restaurants, with the outside stuff, it's a real problem. It can be a real problem. Right, just this morning, I passed somebody going 15, 20 miles an hour right past me with the walker, right? Luckily, I was on Huron, so it was really no problem. But if it's on one of the smaller streets, it really can be a problem. And sometimes you do have to wonder, who does that? Really? Right? And I saw the other day a young woman walking her scooter with a group of friends, paying for the scooter. It's astonishing. But to think that through, and also when people drop that off, and also for people with disabilities and handicaps, just to make sure that doesn't get lost, you can outlaw, you can have all kinds of restrictions on scooters, and then people who use scooters for mobility purposes can't for handicap and disabilities. You want to make sure that they're exempted from some of those rules so that they don't get caught up into that. I'll add the workforce housing. This is obviously this endless problem, and I think it's important to remember that the labor market is changing. Everybody talks about the new gig economy, but it's not really a new economy, it's just expanding, right? If you have anybody in your family who's a professional musician, right? No pension, no benefits, it's not new, it's just expanding to a larger group of people who have this issue, right? There's a small number of people who make very large amounts of money, and then most people are playing the arc. Right, I'm going to a wedding in Nashville in November, right, with an amazingly talented people who struggle to make sure that they can actually maintain a viable working. So this is always a problem, and the challenge we have with workforce housing in the 30 to 60% range is, and even the 80% range, there's no subsidies, right? Well, I work on issues relating to very low income people, right? And there's subsidies, and even with those subsidies, it's a challenge. How complicated could it be to use public land to create housing? Just talk to the city or the county about the Platte Road site. The endless dynamic stuff of that. This is becoming a huge problem. I even know a number of graduate students who they now live in Ypsilanti. Right? Graduate students can't afford to live in Ann Arbor anymore. They can't afford to rent. So they're actually taking the bus. That's why one of the reasons the number 4 is more crowded lately is because they're all coming from Ypsilanti into downtown Ann Arbor. So just keep in mind that those things are starting to happen, and it's happening fast, and we're really going to need to figure out how to address these on a global level. Thank you.
Any other audience participation? Seeing none, I'd like a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.